Before we begin, I want to remind you that this video is a direct continuation of the previous story. If you haven't watched the first part yet, it's already available here on the channel. I strongly recommend that you start from the beginning to catch all the details and twists of this emotional plot. Now get ready, because the second part is even more intense. The truth finally caught up with me. Sitting beside me on the bench, Jack listened in silence as I told him everything. About Robert, about Harold, about the secret that had defined my marriage and my motherhood. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding and a shared sadness for the inevitable messiness of human life. "What will you do now?" he asked when I'd finished. I looked at the lighthouse, still steadfast after centuries of storms and calm seas, of bright days and dark nights. "Keep going," I answered. "Keep writing my letters, keep traveling, keep living for as long as I have left. And Michael? The ball's in his court now. I can't force him to listen, to forgive. All I can do is hope that, with time, he'll be able to see past the initial anger." Jack nodded, pouring wine for us both. "To the truth," he proposed, raising his glass, "no matter how painful." "To the truth," I agreed, touching my glass to his. As the sun began to set behind the lighthouse, painting the horizon in spectacular colors, I thought about the letters I still had to write. To Michael, explaining the full context. To my grandchildren, sharing stories I might never be able to tell in person. To Robert, who would never read it, but who might help me make peace with my own past. And maybe, just maybe, one for Jack. A man who came into my life when I least expected and most needed it. A man who asked nothing but the present, knowing the future wasn't a promise I could make. "Ready to go back?" Jack asked, helping me to my feet. "Yes," I replied, putting the notebook and pens into my bag. Ready for the next chapter. Because that's what life had become for me now. Not years and decades ahead, but chapters. Small, precious chapters I was determined to write with all the honesty, courage, and joy I could gather. The lighthouse would still be there when I was gone, guiding other travelers, witnessing other stories. But for now, for this brief and shining moment, I was still here, alive, awake, finally true to myself. Eleanor Thompson, not just a keeper of secrets anymore, but the author of her own story, right up to the last page. The small town of Kennebunkport, Maine, has all the classic New England charm. White-painted wooden houses, immaculate gardens bursting with blue hydrangeas, antique shops where time seems to have paused somewhere in the last century. I parked my trailer at the riverside campground with a view of fishing boats coming and going from the harbor. Jack moored the Second Chance at the small dock nearby, and soon we were settled into our new temporary home base. We had developed a comfortable routine in the 10 days since leaving Portland. I explored the towns at my own pace each morning, usually visiting local bookstores and hidden cafes, while Jack took care of his boat or went fishing. We'd meet for lunch and spend the afternoons together, sometimes sailing along the coast, other times simply sitting at a lookout, talking about everything and nothing. "Mail for you," Jack announced, stepping into the trailer with an envelope in hand. The campground manager said it came yesterday. It was from Sarah. I recognized her neat handwriting right away, along with the personalized owl sticker she used, a symbol of wisdom that matched her academic personality. "News from home?" Jack asked, putting the kettle on to boil. He already knew my preference for tea over coffee in the afternoons. "From Sarah," I confirmed, carefully opening the envelope. Inside, besides the letter, were a few photos. The first showed Michael in his restaurant, dressed in his chef's uniform, giving the camera that half-smile that always reminded me of Harold. The second was of my grandchildren, Tommy and Amber, in some park, building a sandcastle. The third caught me off guard. An old, yellowed photo of Robert Callahan in his 20s, leaning against his red Mustang, a cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth. "You okay?" Jack asked, noticing the sudden pallor in my face. "It's complicated," I replied, setting the photos down and unfolding the letter. "Dear Mom, I hope this letter finds you well and enjoying your journey. The photos we've seen on your Instagram are wonderful. Who would have thought Eleanor Thompson, Jane Austen expert, would become a travel influencer at 67? And yes, Alan is helping me keep up with your posts. You know how I am with technology." Michael found the letters. I assume he's already contacted you. I'm sorry. I didn't realize they were among the things I saved from the house. He showed up here one night, devastated and furious at the same time. I've never seen him like that, Mom. Not even when Dad died. We spent hours talking. He had so many questions, so many puzzle pieces that finally began to fit for him. Why Dad always seemed more distant with him than with me. Why you were so overprotective. Why he never really looked like anyone else in the family. I won't lie. He's hurt, deeply. Not just by the truth itself, but by the years of silence. All the times he questioned things and was soothed with half-truths. But there's something else too. Something you might not expect. Relief. As if a tension he carried all his life, without understanding it, finally has an explanation. I found Robert's photo, included in this envelope, among the letters. Michael stared at it for a long time, silently. I have his eyes, was all he said. He asked for contact info for Robert's family if you have it. Not for confrontation or drama, I think, but to understand more about his own story, about who he is. As for us, Mom, I'm okay. Worried about you, of course, but Alan has been my rock. His tests came back negative again. 5 years cancer-free. At least some good news amid all of this. Tommy asked about you yesterday. He said he misses your stories about the old days. Amber is busy with her new hobby, photography. I think she inherited your eye for detail. And Michael, he'll be all right, Mom. It will take time. But he's strong. Like you. Stronger than any of us ever realized. Love, Sarah P.S. Who's the gray-bearded man in your photos? The one with the boat? You have things to tell me, Eleanor Thompson. I folded the letter carefully, wiping away a stubborn tear. Hard news? Jack asked gently, setting a steaming cup of tea in front of me. Not exactly, I replied. Complicated, like everything in life. My son, he's processing the truth about where he comes from. Jack nodded, sitting across from me at the tiny trailer table. And is that good or bad? Both, I suppose. Truth is usually like that, isn't it? Painful and liberating at the same time. I showed him Robert's photo, explaining who he was. Jack examined it with interest. Do you see your son in him? Yes, I admitted. The same eyes, the same stubborn jaw, the same intensity. I understand why you kept the secret, Jack said, handing back the photo. But I also understand why your son needs to know. What do you think I should do now? Jack sipped his tea thoughtfully. What do you want to do? I looked out the trailer window at the sea stretching out before us. Constant, relentless, always in motion, just like time and life. I want to give him space to process, and then, maybe meet, try to explain my side of the story if he's willing to listen. Sounds like a good plan. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just the sound of seagulls and wind filling the space between us. You know, Jack began, a smile playing at his lips. You've become famous at the campground. What? The lady with the blue trailer. The professor who gave up everything to live on the road. The younger campers are fascinated. I overheard some of them talking about your Instagram. I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. My students would be shocked if they could see Dr. Thompson now. The woman who once devoted a whole semester to analyzing the importance of decorum in Pride and Prejudice, now living in a trailer and, well, involved with a bearded sailor. Jack feigned outrage. Involved? Is that what the young people call it these days? How would you rather I describe this? I asked, gesturing between us. He took my hand across the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. An unlikely statistic? A happy accident? 2 ships that weren't supposed to meet, but somehow anchored in the same harbor? Poet and sailor. A dangerous combination. He leaned over the table and kissed me softly. What do you say we sail out to a little island nearby tomorrow? There's a seal colony that usually hangs out on the rocks, and if we're lucky, we might spot some whales. They've been coming close to shore this week. Whales. You promised me whales when we first met, and Jack Peterson always keeps his promises. That night, sitting around the campground's communal fire, I listened to the stories of other travelers. A retired couple who'd sold everything to live in an RV. A young woman traveling the coast, photographing lighthouses for a book. A middle-aged man who left his corporate job after a near-fatal heart attack. All of them running from something. All of them searching for something. Just like me. The sea teaches us many things, said the heart attack survivor, as we watched the flames dance. The constancy of change, the inevitability of storms, the importance of finding safe harbors. But mostly, it teaches us that no matter how small our boat, we can still set sail. His words resonated within me. My boat, the time I had left, was small, but I could still sail. We set off before dawn, with the second chance gliding quietly over dark waters. Jack had packed a basket with coffee, fruit, and sandwiches. Wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill, I watched the shoreline drift away, the city lights still twinkling in the distance. "Ready for your first whale-watching expedition?" Jack asked, adjusting the sails. "Born ready," I replied, feeling almost childlike excitement. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky pink and gold, I realized how alive I felt. Every cell in my body, even the sick ones, the betrayers, seemed to vibrate in harmony with the wind, the sea, the present moment. We approached a small rocky island where, as Jack had promised, dozens of seals lay sunning themselves, their slick bodies shining like polished stones. Some raised their heads curiously as we drew near, while pups played in the tide pools between the rocks. "They're like sea dogs," I said, enchanted by their clumsy movements on land, so graceful in the water. "Good eye," Jack agreed. Old sailors used to call them Neptune's dogs. We spent nearly an hour watching the seals before Jack steered the boat into deeper waters. "This is where whales have been spotted," he explained, slowing down and preparing the binoculars. "Now it's a matter of patience and a little luck." Luck was with us that morning. After about 40 minutes of waiting, drinking coffee and sharing childhood stories, Jack pointed to a disturbance on the water's surface a few hundred yards away. "There!" he exclaimed, handing me the binoculars. At first, I saw only a spray of water on the horizon, but then, majestically, a huge humpback whale surfaced, its massive body arcing gracefully before diving again, tail rising like a wave before disappearing into the deep. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hands trembling with awe. "It's magnificent." In the next few minutes, we saw not just one, but 3 humpbacks, probably a mother and 2 calves, moving in perfect sync, a timeless aquatic dance. "They're feeding," Jack explained, keeping a respectful distance. "This is one of the great feeding grounds on the East Coast." We watched in reverent silence as the creatures moved with a grace that seemed impossible for beings so immense. In one magical moment, one of them breached, its entire body leaving the water and hanging suspended in the air before crashing back down in a thunderous splash. Tears streamed freely down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were pure wonder, a feeling connected to something bigger and older than myself, than all of us. "Thank you," I whispered to Jack, who held me tight. "For this, for everything." He just nodded, understanding that some experiences go beyond words. When we finally returned to the harbor, it was already afternoon. I felt transformed, not dramatically or suddenly, but in a subtle, profound way, as if the whales had shown me a truth I'd always known but never fully grasped. We're all just temporary visitors in this vast, mysterious world. That night, sitting at my trailer's table, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I saw whales, ancient creatures that sailed these seas when our ancestors were still learning to make fire. Beings whose existence transcends our human understanding of time. Cancer showed me how fragile our time here is. The whales showed me how insignificant that fragility is in the grand scheme of things. It's not sad, it's liberating. We are only a brief moment in the breath of the universe, a sigh, a blink. But oh, what a privilege this blink is. What a gift this breath is." Michael found out the truth about his biological father. At first, I thought it would destroy what was left of our relationship. Now, after seeing those magnificent creatures, I understand it's just part of a larger pattern I can't fully comprehend, like the ocean currents that guide the whales from place to place, following an invisible map etched in their memory. Maybe we're all just following currents we can't see, obeying laws we can't articulate. Sarah wrote that Michael feels relief, as well as pain. I understand that now. There's relief in letting yourself be carried by the current, in stopping the fight against the tide. Tomorrow I'll write to Michael, not to apologize, though there's much to ask forgiveness for, but to offer context, to share my side of the story that now belongs to both of us. And then I'll keep going, with Jack, for now, alone when the time comes, following my own invisible current wherever it leads. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the star-filled sky. Jack had gone back to his boat to check on something, promising to return for dinner. I picked up my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, opened the Instagram account Sarah had helped me set up before the trip. I posted a photo of the whales we'd seen, with the caption, "Today I saw giants in the sea, and understood how small our worries really are, and still, how grand it is to worry, to love, to lose, to find." Levinwill Kenyi. Less than a minute later, I got a notification. Michael had liked my photo. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was a beginning. And for someone with a limited horizon like mine, beginnings were all I could ask for. Martha's Vineyard in July is a postcard of the American summer. White sandy beaches, pastel-painted wooden houses, sailboats gliding by like white brush strokes on the blue horizon. It's the kind of place my old self, pre-diagnosis, pre-revelation Eleanor, would have considered pretentious and overrated. Now, sitting in a faded beach chair in front of the little cottage we'd rented for a week, I saw it with new eyes. "More lemonade?" Jack asked, lifting the sweating pitcher in the afternoon heat. "Yes, please," I replied, holding out my glass. "With this heat, I'll probably drink a whole gallon." We'd been on the island for 4 days. My trailer was parked at a campground on the mainland, and Jack's boat was docked in the town's small harbor. The beachfront cottage, wildly expensive for peak season, but a luxury we decided to allow ourselves, offered a stunning view of the beach and the simple indulgence of a decent shower after weeks of campground facilities. "Any news?" Jack asked casually, though he knew exactly what I meant. I shook my head, adjusting the wide straw hat that shielded me from the sun. "Nothing yet, but the mail here is slow. Maybe tomorrow." It had been almost 2 weeks since I sent the letter to Michael, 10 handwritten pages pouring out 40 years of truths, half-truths, and unspoken feelings. I explained the full context of my brief encounter with Robert, the rushed marriage to Harold, the silent pact my husband and I made never to openly discuss Michael's paternity. I wrote about the real love Harold had for him, despite or maybe because of the situation. And finally, I revealed my diagnosis and my wish to make peace before it was too late. Sarah had confirmed the letter arrived, and Michael had received it. But since then, silence. "He'll respond when he's ready," Jack commented, picking up the nautical novel I'd bought for him at a local bookstore. "And what if he's never ready?" I asked, voicing the fear that haunted me. "And what if time runs out before—" Jack set the book down, meeting my eyes. "Eleanor, you did your part. You reached out, offered the truth. The rest isn't in your control. It's hard to accept that. Life usually is." He was right, of course. One of the hardest lessons I'd learned in these months of travel was just that, recognizing the limits of my control. As a teacher, mother, and wife, I'd spent decades believing I could shape outcomes through effort, determination, and, yes, a healthy dose of control. Now, faced with a body rebelling and relationships on their own unpredictable paths, I was learning, painfully, the art of letting go. "I'm going for a swim," I announced, standing and adjusting the swimsuit I never thought I'd wear at 67. A deep blue model Jack had picked out, swearing it matched my eyes. "Want company?" "No, I need a few minutes alone. To think." He nodded, as understanding as ever. The water was perfect, cool enough to relieve the heat, but not so cold as to be uncomfortable. I swam past the break of little waves, floating on my back in the calmer water. Above me, the sky was such an intense blue it almost hurt to look at. A few wispy clouds, like a minimalist painter's strokes, drifted slowly, pushed by the ocean breeze. I closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face, the water holding me up like a gentle hand. The sea had always had this effect on me, a sense of returning, of primordial belonging, as if every cell in my body recognized the salt we shared, the rhythm of the waves echoing my own heartbeat. I thought of Michael, Sarah, my grandchildren. I thought of Harold and the years we shared, imperfect, sometimes difficult, but real. I thought of Robert, who never knew he had a son, whose brief presence in my life changed its course forever. And I thought of Jack, a gift I never expected in this final phase of my journey. A companion who asked for no promises I couldn't keep, who wasn't frightened by my mortality, who saw me completely, not just the teacher, the mother, the terminal patient, but Eleanor in all her messy, contradictory wholeness. When I returned to the beach, I saw Jack was no longer in his chair. In his place stood a familiar figure, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair now streaked with gray at the temples. My heart stopped for a moment. Michael. He stood there, hands in the pockets of his khaki shorts, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He wore a simple t-shirt from the restaurant he ran in Boston. Callahan's, the name he'd chosen years ago, not knowing just how appropriate it was. I walked slowly out of the water, wrapping myself in the towel I'd left on the chair. The closer I got, the more I noticed the changes in him. He looked thinner, tenser, the lines around his mouth deeper than the last time I saw him. "Michael," I finally said, when we stood face to face. "You came." "Sarah gave me the address," he replied, his voice restrained. "Hope you don't mind." "Of course not. I'm glad you're here." An awkward silence settled between us, filled only by the sound of waves and distant gulls. "I got your letter," he finally said. "I know. I read it 3 times. I waited, giving him space to go on in his own time. Why didn't you tell me about the cancer when I saw you on the 4th of July? Of all the questions he could have asked, that one caught me off guard. "I tried," I answered honestly. "I had the results with me. I was waiting for the right moment. But then, I slammed the door in your face," he finished, taking off his sunglasses. His eyes, Robert's eyes, were red, as if he hadn't slept well in days. "Literally and figuratively. It wasn't your fault. I showed up unannounced, invaded your space." He shook his head, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "Can we sit?" he asked, pointing to the beach chairs. We sat side by side, staring at the ocean. Somehow it was easier that way, not facing each other directly, but sharing the same view. "I'm angry," he finally said. "Not just about the original lie, though that's big enough. I'm angry about all the years of pretending. For every time I asked why I didn't look like Dad, and you said I had Grandma's jaw or Uncle's eyes. For every time I felt something was wrong, something unsaid, and you reassured me I was imagining things. Every word was true, and every word hurt. I didn't try to defend myself. The worst part," he went on, "is that some part of me always knew. The way Dad looked at me sometimes, not coldly, as I thought for years, but with this sort of distant admiration. Like he was looking at something precious that didn't entirely belong to him." "He loved you, Michael," I interrupted, unable to hold back, "more than you can imagine. I know that now. That's what makes it so complicated." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me achingly of Harold. Some mannerisms, at least, had been inherited by living together, not just by blood. If he'd been a terrible father, it would be easier. I could just hate him, hate you, and move on. But he was a good dad. Not perfect, but good. And that means I have to reconcile the man I knew with the man I found out he was. "The truth is rarely simple," I said softly. "No, it isn't." He looked at me directly for the first time. "Why are you telling me all this now?" The question I knew would come eventually. "Because I'm dying," I said simply. "And because you deserve to know your own story." 6 to 8 months, the letter said. That was almost 2 months ago. So, 4 to 6 now. Maybe less. He closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing the blow. "And treatment?" I decided against it. I wanted quality, not quantity. Michael nodded slowly. "Is that why you're on this journey? Selling the house, buying a trailer, posting Instagram photos like a teenager?" There was a hint of reluctant humor in his voice that gave me hope. "Partly, yes, but also because I realized I spent my whole life being who everyone else expected me to be. The proper wife, the respectable teacher, the mother who always knows best." I gave a small smile. "Apparently I'm having my midlife crisis a few decades late." He almost smiled. "Not quite, but almost." "Sarah mentioned a man, Jack?" "Yes, he's out for a walk, giving us privacy." "Are you together?" "We're sharing this moment of our lives," I answered, searching for the right words. "He's a widower. He understands loss, change. He's not looking for a forever I can't give." Michael looked out at the ocean again, thoughtful. "I found Robert's family," he said abruptly. My half-brother lives in Chicago. He's my age, a university professor, physics, has 3 kids. Have you contacted him?" "Not yet, but I'm thinking about it. He has the right to know, doesn't he? Just like I did." "Yes," I agreed. "But remember, it'll be a bombshell in his life too, just like it was in yours." "I know." Another silence stretched out between us, less tense than before. "You haven't asked about the restaurant," he finally commented. "How's the restaurant?" I asked, grateful for the move to safer ground. "We got a Michelin star." "Michael, that's wonderful." The genuine joy in my voice seemed to surprise him. I always knew you'd make it, ever since that perfect hollandaise you made at 16. You remember that? Of course I do. You were so proud. Harold took photos. Mentioning Harold brought tension back to the air. He knew I had a talent for cooking, Michael said quietly. He gave me my first set of professional knives. He wanted you to follow your own path, I confirmed. Not become a doctor like him. Unlike you, Michael commented, an old hurt surfacing. Unlike me, I agreed. I made a lot of mistakes, Michael. As a mother, as a wife, the lie about your paternity was just the biggest one. But never, not for a second, did I stop loving you. He didn't reply right away. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. The kids ask about you. Tommy wants to know why Grandma's posting beach photos instead of making cookies with him. And what do you tell him? That Grandma's on an adventure, that she'll come back. I didn't correct his white lie. We both knew my return would be brief, if it happened at all. I'd like to meet him, he said, gesturing at the ocean. Jack, the man who got my mother posting whale photos on Instagram. I laughed, surprised and relieved. He'll like you. He's a good cook too in his own simple way. Michael stood, reaching out a hand to help me up. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, he said, as we walked back to the cottage. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm ready to try to understand. That's all I can ask, I replied. Jack was on the porch, pretending to read his book, but his sharp eyes caught us as soon as we approached. He stood, a cautious smile on his bearded face. You must be Michael, he said, holding out a hand. Your mom talks about you a lot. Hopefully not all terrible, Michael replied, shaking his hand. Only about your temper in the kitchen. Apparently you're a tyrant with the pans. The comment broke the tension, and Michael laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in so long it nearly made me cry. Only with people who don't know the difference between browning and burning. The two men sized each other up, like cautious animals on unfamiliar ground. Then Jack smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his whole face. I'm about to cook some fish I caught this morning. Would you like to show me how a Michelin-starred chef would handle them? It would be my pleasure, Michael replied, the first real smile spreading across his face. As I watched them walk together toward the little cottage kitchen, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost knocked me over. It wasn't a happy ending. Life rarely offers those, but it was a beginning. A new chapter in our family's complicated story. And for someone with a limited number of pages left, that was more than enough. That night, under the Martha's Vineyard stars, with the ocean's sound as our soundtrack, we shared a meal. Not perfect, not without moments of discomfort or painful memories, but together. Like tides always returning to the shore, some connections are too strong to be permanently broken. Damaged, altered, transformed, yes, but never completely lost. The tide of family was returning, even if in new and unexpected forms, and I was here to witness it. The end of August brought with it the first whispers of autumn to the Rhode Island coast. The crowds of tourists were starting to thin out. The nights gradually grew longer, and a certain golden melancholy hung in the air, that bittersweet feeling of a summer saying goodbye. I parked my trailer in Newport, in a small campground overlooking the ocean. Jack had left temporarily. His daughter needed help moving into a new house in Portland, and he promised to return in 2 weeks. Our farewell was simple, without drama. We both knew time was too precious to waste on unnecessary tears. I'll be back before you know it, he promised, kissing me on the forehead before he left. Try not to fall in love with another bearded sailor while I'm gone. I can't promise anything, I replied with a smile. You know how we 67-year-old women with terminal cancer are. Absolutely irresistible. He laughed, that deep laugh I'd learned to love, and left. And so, for the first time in almost 2 months, I found myself truly alone. It was strange, not necessarily bad, just different. Jack had become a constant comforting presence, and his absence left a space I still wasn't sure how to fill. What does one do when time becomes so visibly finite, when the days are no longer taken for granted, but counted and precious? I decided to walk along Newport's famous Cliff Walk, a 3.5-mile trail that winds between Gilded Age mansions and the Atlantic Ocean. The sky was exceptionally blue that afternoon, dotted with a few clouds that looked like brushstrokes from an impressionist painter. I'd walked about a mile when the phone rang. Sarah. Hi, sweetheart, I answered, sitting down on a bench overlooking the waves crashing against the rocks below. Mom. Her voice sounded strangely upbeat. Are you sitting down? I literally just sat down. What is it? Michael called. He contacted your half-brother in Chicago, James Callahan. My heart sped up. And? They talked for almost 3 hours. Apparently, James always knew there was something odd about his family's story. Robert, his father, mentioned once when he was very sick at the end, something about the woman from Boston and a choice he made. It never made sense to James until now. How did he react to the news? Surprised, obviously. Shocked, but also curious. He has photos of Robert he's sending to Michael. And more importantly, Mom, he wants to meet you. I felt tears welling up. Robert's son, a man I had known so briefly, so intensely, so many decades ago, wanted to meet me. Does he know about my situation? Michael told him. James is a physics professor, but his wife is an oncologist. They understand what 4 to 6 months means. And even so, he wants to see me? Especially because of it, Sarah replied softly. He said he spent his whole life with a missing piece in his family puzzle. Now finally, some things make sense about his own father, about himself. How did Michael feel about all of this? Sarah hesitated briefly. It's complicated for him, of course, but also freeing, I think. As if he finally has permission to be different from Harold, to embrace the part of himself that never really fit in our family. I stayed silent for a moment, taking it all in. The waves kept crashing below, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding above. James asked if he could come visit you, Sarah continued. In Newport, next weekend, with his wife, Karen. So soon? Mom, Sarah said gently, time isn't exactly a luxury we have right now. The reality of my condition, so easy to ignore on good days when the pain was minimal and the energy enough to explore new places, reclaimed its spot at the forefront. Of course, I agreed. Tell him he's welcome. Actually, Michael suggested all of us should go. Him, me, Alan, the kids, a kind of family reunion, the first and maybe only one with everyone present. The proposal left me speechless. After months of distance, closed doors, and wounded hearts, my son was not only accepting me back into his life, but actively orchestrating a family gathering. A gesture of reconciliation, as unexpected as it was profound. I'd love that, I finally managed to say. But my trailer is way too small for everyone. We've already thought of that. Michael found a house to rent near your campground. It's big enough for all of us, including James and Karen. It's just 10 minutes from where you are. He really thought of everything, didn't he? He's always been meticulous, Sarah said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, just like you. After we hung up, I remained on the bench for a long time, watching the ocean. Life, I reflected, sometimes surprises us precisely when we think we already know its course, like the sea, which seems constant from afar, but reveals infinite variations when you look up close. The week went by in a whirlwind of preparations and anticipation. I sent messages to Jack, telling him about the upcoming reunion. He offered to return right away, but I assured him I was fine, that this was something I needed to face alone, or rather, with my family. On Friday afternoon, I parked in front of the rented house, a beautiful 3-story Victorian with a wraparound porch and ocean views. Michael was already there, supervising the delivery of supplies he'd ordered for the weekend. You're not planning to feed an army, are you? I asked, watching boxes of fresh seafood, organic vegetables, and fine wines being unloaded. Just making sure we have options, he replied, hugging me briefly. The gesture, still a little stiff and weighed down by decades of secrets, was still a huge step forward compared to the slammed door in July. Sarah and her family arrived an hour later. Tommy, now 10, ran to me with all the ease of childhood. Grandma, did you really swim with whales? The pictures on Mom's phone are real? I laughed, hugging him tight. Not exactly with them, but close enough to see their eyes. They're bigger than cars, you know. Amber, at 13, was in that awkward phase between childhood and adolescence. Her hug was more reserved, but her eyes lit up when I mentioned I'd bought a professional camera at a pawn shop in Newport. Can we go photograph the sunset at the beach later? She asked, the first genuine sign of interest she'd shown in a while. That would be perfect, I replied. Alan, Sarah's husband, had always been the ideal son-in-law, respectful but not distant, familiar but never intrusive. His hug was warm and sincere. You look great, Eleanor, he said. Life on the road obviously suits you. He didn't mention that I was noticeably thinner, that my skin had taken on that slightly translucent tone characteristic of certain advanced illnesses. Some things are better quietly acknowledged and gently ignored. James and Karen Callahan arrived promptly at 6. When I opened the door and saw James, the resemblance to Robert nearly took my breath away. The same intense eyes, the same face shape, even the way he tilted his head slightly as he greeted me. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a large man. "It's surreal to finally meet you. Please call me Eleanor," I replied, unable to look away. It was like seeing a ghost, not Robert as I'd known him, young and wild, but as he might have been if he'd lived to this age. Karen, a stylish woman with gray hair in a modern bob, shook my hand with the firm, professional grip of a doctor. "It's an honor," she said simply. Her eyes, compassionate but clinical, quickly assessed me. I recognized that look. It was the same one the doctors in Boston had given me when discussing my prognosis. She knew exactly what she was seeing. The dinner Michael prepared was, as expected, extraordinary. Fresh seafood transformed into dishes worthy of his Michelin star, perfectly paired wines, and a dessert of caramelized fruits that even made the serious Karen close her eyes in appreciation. Conversation flowed surprisingly naturally, given the circumstances. James talked about his work in theoretical physics at the University of Chicago, about his 3 now adult children, my biological grandchildren, whom I would never know. Karen shared stories from her work in pediatric oncology, while Sarah and Alan discussed their latest academic projects. I watched Michael and James interact, 2 men who had just discovered their kinship, studying each other with barely disguised fascination. With each shared gesture, each similar expression, I saw the recognition in both their eyes. It was like watching a puzzle come together in real time. After dinner, while everyone else gathered on the porch for after-dinner drinks, James invited me for a walk in the garden. The evening was mild, the sky dotted with stars, and the distant sound of the ocean provided the perfect soundtrack for our conversation. "My father spoke of Boston with a nostalgia I never really understood," he began, walking slowly beside me along the stone paths. "We lived in Chicago my whole life, but he always said a part of him had stayed in Massachusetts. Robert had a special talent for living intensely," I said, "even for a short period." James smiled, a smile painfully familiar. "That's the perfect description. Intense, in everything. Work, leisure, love." He stopped, looking at me directly. "He loved my mother deeply. I need you to know that. Whatever there was between you, it was brief," I assured him. "A moment out of time. We were young, and we had been important to each other before life took us in different directions." "He would have been proud of Michael," James said gently, "and devastated not to have known him." "Harold was a wonderful father," I replied. "Michael was lucky in that way." "Yes, Michael told me about him. He seems to have been an extraordinary man. Accepting and loving a child who wasn't biologically his, that takes a special kind of greatness." We walked in silence for a few moments, each lost in our own thoughts. "Karen says you declined treatment," James finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes, I chose quality over quantity." He nodded, understanding. "My father made the same choice in the end. He said he'd rather truly live for 3 months than miserably exist for 6. "We have more in common than I imagined," I observed. "Karen respected your decision, by the way. As a doctor, she understands better than most what prolonging life really means versus prolonging the process of dying. She seems like a remarkable woman." "She is." He smiled again. "We've been together 38 years and I still find her fascinating." Another comfortable silence settled between us. "There's something I want to ask you," James said finally. "Something personal." "Go ahead. Do you regret it? The choice you made? Not telling Robert? Moving on with Harold?" It was the question I'd asked myself countless times over the decades. "I don't have a simple answer," I replied honestly. "I regret the lie, the secrecy. I regret the pain it eventually caused Michael. But I don't regret my life with Harold, imperfect as it was, or the man Michael became." I paused, weighing my next words. "And now that I've met you, I can't regret that Robert had the life he did, the family he built." James considered my answer for a moment, then nodded. "That's a wise answer. Life rarely offers us perfect choices, only different imperfect paths." A surprisingly philosophical observation for a physicist. I remarked with a small smile. Modern physics is basically philosophy with equations, he replied, returning the smile. The more we study the universe, the more we realize reality is less about absolute certainties and more about probabilities and possibilities, like life. When we returned to the house, we found the others in the living room, looking through old photo albums Sarah had brought. Michael and Amber were leaning over a photo, laughing at some long-ago mischief. "This is from the camping trip," Michael exclaimed, "when I tried to build a raft and ended up in the ER with 10 stitches in my knee." "And you still insisted the raft would have worked if we'd had more time," Sarah added, rolling her eyes. I joined them on the couch, watching the images of the past, birthdays, graduations, family vacations, the story of our lives documented in faded photographs. "There aren't many pictures of you, Grandma," Tommy observed, flipping pages. "Were you always the one taking them?" "Your grandma never liked being photographed," Sarah explained. "She said she preferred to watch rather than be watched." "That's changed lately," Michael noted, pulling out his phone and showing off my Instagram profile. "Now she's practically an influencer." Everyone laughed, and so did I, feeling a wave of gratitude for this moment. Imperfect, unexpected, precious precisely because of its improbability. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stayed out on the porch, watching the ocean under the moonlight. Michael joined me, bringing 2 glasses of wine. "I shouldn't be drinking with my meds," I remarked, taking it anyway. "A sip won't kill you," he replied, then froze, realizing what he'd said. "Mom, I didn't mean—" I started to laugh, and after a moment of shock, he joined me. We laughed together, as we hadn't in years, maybe decades. "How are you really doing?" he asked when our laughter subsided. "Fine, considering. The pain meds work most of the time. I have good days and bad days. Today is definitely a good day." He nodded, looking at his glass. "Meeting James was surreal. It's like looking in a mirror warped by time. I see parts of myself in him I never understood before." "You two are very much alike," I agreed. "Not just physically. It's strange. I should be angry, resentful, and part of me is. But I also feel like I finally have permission to be completely myself, to embrace parts of my personality that always felt out of place in our family." "You've always been perfectly yourself, Michael. That's what makes you special." He took a sip of wine, considering my words. "I met someone," he said abruptly. "A woman. Her name's Eliza. She's a sommelier, works at the restaurant." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for him. His marriage to Diane had ended 2 years ago, a bitter divorce that left scars for everyone, especially the kids. "I want you to meet her," he continued. "She's different from anyone I've ever known. Direct, honest to the core. Exactly what I need after years of half-truths and unspoken secrets." The irony wasn't lost on me. My son, wounded by a lifetime of secrets, now seeking a relationship built on absolute honesty. "I'd love to meet her," I said. "Maybe when I pass through Boston?" "Are you going back to Boston then? When the trip ends?" The unspoken question hung between us. "Where do you want to be when the end comes?" "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "Part of me wants to be on the road until the very end. Another part thinks about staying near you, all at the end." "What does Jack think?" "He says it's my decision. He'll be by my side no matter what I choose." Michael studied my face with intensity. "Do you love him?" The question caught me off guard. Love, a word I'd always used so carefully. "It's different from what I felt for your father," I answered slowly. "Different from what I felt for Robert. It's a love without expectations or projections, without the weight of the past or anxiety for the future. It's present, real, simple." "So yes," Michael concluded with a small smile. "Yes," I agreed. "I suppose so." We sat in silence for a few moments, contemplating the vast, dark ocean before us. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he finally said. The words so unexpected I nearly dropped my glass. "For this journey, for facing the truth, for living your last months on your own terms." The tears came without warning, warm against my cheeks, cooled by the night breeze. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means more than you can imagine." Michael covered my hand with his, a simple gesture that crossed decades of complexity, of imperfect but persistent love. "We won't waste the time that's left," he promised. Looking out at the infinite sea under the starry sky, with my son's hand in mine, I felt a peace I'd searched for my whole life. Time was limited. It always was, even before the diagnosis. The difference now was that I finally knew how to use it. Bar Harbor, Maine in October is an explosion of colors that defies description. The foliage in Acadia National Park turns into a kaleidoscope of fiery reds, vibrant oranges, and golden yellows, reflecting off the ocean like an impressionist dream. The air has that crystalline quality only autumn brings, sharp, clean, carrying the scent of ripe apples and salty sea. It was the perfect place for a farewell. My condition had worsened significantly over the past weeks. Pain, once an occasional visitor, had become a constant companion, only partly tamed by increasingly strong medication. Fatigue wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, limiting my activities to just a few hours a day. Still, I insisted on making this last trip north to complete the circle I had begun months before. Jack was by my side, just as he had been consistently since returning from Portland in September. His boat, the Second Chance, was docked in the small harbor, and we had left the trailer parked in a quiet campground overlooking the mountains. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" he asked gently, helping me into a heavier coat. "We can wait until tomorrow if you're too tired." "No," I answered firmly. "Today is perfect. Besides, it might rain tomorrow." We both knew it wasn't just the weather I was worried about. Good days, the ones when pain was manageable and I had enough energy to actually participate in life, were becoming increasingly rare. Today was one of those days, a gift I couldn't waste. "So, to Cadillac Mountain?" he confirmed, picking up the small backpack with water, snacks, and my medication. "To Cadillac Mountain," I agreed. The rental car climbed the winding road to the highest point on the East Coast with ease. Jack drove slowly, allowing me to take in every breathtaking view that appeared around each bend. The Atlantic Ocean stretched out endlessly to our right, dotted with small islands that looked like jewels scattered on blue velvet. "They say this is the first place in the United States to see the sunrise," I commented, recalling the tourist brochure I'd read. "We should come back tomorrow and check," Jack suggested, though we both knew that was unlikely. Today's effort would probably leave me too exhausted for another early morning outing. "Maybe in another life," I replied softly. Jack squeezed my hand, never taking his eyes off the road. When we reached the summit, I was momentarily breathless, and not just because of the cancer that was gradually consuming my lungs. The view was beyond words. On a clear day like this, you could see for dozens of miles in all directions. Rolling mountains covered in multicolored forests, the vast ocean sparkling under the autumn sun, islands and peninsulas tracing delicate patterns against the deep blue. Jack found a more secluded spot, away from the other tourists, and spread out a blanket on rocks that had been smoothed by millennia of wind and weather. He helped me sit, arranging pillows to support my back, which had ached constantly these last days. "Last picnic with a view?" He smiled, pulling a thermos of hot tea and some carefully wrapped sandwiches from the backpack. "The best picnic," I corrected, accepting the cup he offered. We ate in comfortable silence, sharing a sandwich. My appetite had shrunk dramatically, watching a pair of hawks lazily circling in the thermals above us. "They make it look so easy," I said, watching the birds glide effortlessly, just existing in the moment, letting the wind carry them. Jack followed my gaze. "There's a lesson there, I imagine. Probably several, but I'm too tired for philosophy today." He smiled, the smile that had become an anchor for me these last months. Kind, understanding, present. After we finished eating, Jack took a small leather-bound notebook out of his pocket. I recognized it immediately. "I brought your journal," he said. "I thought you might want to write, given the view." I accepted the notebook, running my fingers over the soft cover that now showed signs of constant use. Inside, pages and pages of my handwriting, documenting this final journey. Observations, reflections, letters to people who might never read them. "Actually," I said, "I was thinking of giving this to you." He looked at me surprised. "Your journal? Eleanor, that's very personal. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. But there's one condition." "What's that?" "You can only read it after—" I hesitated, still unable to say the words directly. "After I'm no longer here." Jack took the journal with reverence, as if it were something infinitely precious and fragile. "I promise," he said simply. I reached into my bag and took out a thick, sealed envelope, addressed by hand. "And this is for Sarah, my last letters. One for her, one for Michael, one for each of my grandchildren, and one for James, too." "You really have thought of everything, haven't you?" Jack remarked, carefully placing the envelope in the backpack. I've always been organized, almost to a fault. Ask any of my former students. Dr. Thompson and her meticulously structured lesson plans were legendary in the literature department. We laughed together, and for a moment, the constant pain in my body faded into the background. They're arriving tomorrow? Jack asked. Yes, Michael, Sarah, and their families, James and Karen. Everyone will be at the cottage by noon. The cottage was a beautiful seaside property that Michael had rented for a week. The final gathering, as I called it in my mind. Everyone knew what it meant, though no one said it out loud. It will be good, Jack commented, to have everyone together again. It'll be chaotic, I corrected with a weak smile. Too many strong personalities under one roof. But yes, it'll be good. A comfortable silence settled between us, filled only by the sound of wind and distant birds. At last, I found the courage for the conversation I'd been putting off. Jack, we need to talk about what happens after. He tensed slightly beside me, but didn't look away. I'm listening. I want to stay at the cottage, with the family, for the end. He nodded slowly. I understand. Sarah already spoke with a local doctor who will make house calls, and Karen being an oncologist helps too. They'll make sure I have everything I need for comfort. The word comfort, the usual euphemism for dying without excessive pain, hung between us like a heavy cloud. And you? I asked gently. What will you do? Jack looked out at the horizon, his eyes reflecting the endless blue of the sky. I'll stay close as long as you want me. After that, he shrugged, a gesture meant to look casual but unable to hide his emotion. I'll go back to the sea, I guess. That's where I've always found peace. I'll miss you, I said simply, words completely inadequate for what this man had come to mean to me over these past months. And I'll miss you, he replied, taking my hand. But I won't regret a single moment, not even the ending. We sat like that for a long time, hands entwined, looking out at the vast, glorious world that stretched below us. The autumn colors seemed to intensify as the sun began its descent toward the west, as if nature was determined to put on its most dazzling show for my farewell. You know, I said finally, when I got the diagnosis, my first feeling was panic, not just for the imminent end, but for all the things I'd never done, places I'd never seen, experiences I put off for some later that never came. Jack listened quietly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the palm of my hand. But these last few months, I've lived more fully than in decades of so-called good health. I saw whales, Jack. I swam in oceans I'd never dared before. I made peace with my son. I met family I never knew I had. I paused, looking at him meaningfully. And I found a love I didn't expect, wasn't looking for, but that turned my last days into something luminous. Eleanor Thompson. He smiled, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You changed my days, too. When Catherine died, I thought I'd never find this kind of connection again. And then, there you were, wrestling with a lobster at Portland Lobster Company. We laughed at the memory. Me, so clearly out of my element. Him, so at home. We're an unlikely pair, I commented. The best ones usually are. As the sun neared the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack helped me to my feet. We stood together side by side, facing the strengthening wind. One last picture, he suggested, pulling his phone from his pocket. For Instagram? I teased. For us, he corrected. He stood next to me, arm firmly around my waist for support, and held out his phone to capture the two of us with the spectacular sunset behind us. In that moment, with the wind tousling my now completely white, short hair, and the pain momentarily forgotten, I felt more alive than ever. The camera's click captured the moment for posterity. Two smiling seniors, the sky ablaze behind them, at the top of the world. The next morning, I woke up with difficulty. The night had been hard, the pain unrelenting despite the medication. Jack was already up, making tea in the small trailer kitchen. Good morning, he smiled, bringing me a steaming cup. How are you feeling? Honestly? Like I was hit by a train, I replied, trying to sit up with his help. But it was worth it for yesterday's view. He nodded, helping me with my morning pills. We both knew the energy reserves I'd built up were quickly running out. The doctor in Boston had warned me there would be a decline, and when it started, it would be fast. The family arrives in a few hours, Jack said, checking his watch. Do you want me to take you to the cottage now, so you can rest a bit first? Yes, please. And you? Are you coming too? Jack hesitated briefly. I think today should be just for family. You have a lot to share, a lot to say to each other. I'll be nearby if you need me, on the boat or in the trailer. Just a call away. I understood his thoughtfulness, his wish not to intrude on my last moments with my children and grandchildren. That was Jack, always aware of other people's space, always respectful of the invisible boundaries of relationships. Your family now too, I said softly, in a different way, but no less real. His eyes softened with barely contained emotion. Thank you for that, but I still think the first day at least should be just for you all. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, I'll come for dinner. Michael mentioned something about making lobster. He's going to try to impress you with his cooking skills, I said with a little smile. Given his Michelin star, I think he just might. The cottage Michael had rented was even more beautiful than the one at Martha's Vineyard. A spacious, elegant home with wide windows facing the ocean, a wraparound deck, and direct access to a small private beach. Jack helped me settle into the main floor bedroom, making sure all my medications were organized and within easy reach. Are you sure you'll be all right until they get here? He asked, clearly reluctant to leave me alone. Absolutely. I'll probably take a nap. The trip wore me out more than I expected. He leaned down and kissed me gently, his gray beard brushing my cheek. Call if you need anything. Anything at all. I promise. After he left, the quiet of the empty cottage wrapped around me like a blanket. Through the big windows I could see the ocean, gray-blue today, with small waves capped with white foam. The tide was coming in, inching closer to the line of rocks that marked the property's edge. Like time itself, I thought sleepily, inexorably drawing near. I closed my eyes, letting myself drift with the rhythmic sound of the waves. Mom, Mom, we're here. Sarah's voice brought me back to awareness. I opened my eyes to see my daughter leaning over me, her face a mix of worry and relief. Sorry, I murmured, trying to orient myself. I think I slept longer than I meant to. That's okay. You needed the rest. Gradually, I became aware of the sounds of the house. Voices talking in the kitchen, the clinking of pots and pans, footsteps going up and down stairs. The family had arrived. With Sarah's help, I managed to get up and change out of my pajamas into a comfortable outfit she'd set aside. I combed my short hair, put on a bit of lipstick, small gestures of normalcy that made me feel more human and less like a patient. Michael appeared at the door, wearing an apron over a casual shirt. Sleeping Beauty finally woke up, he joked, coming in for a gentle hug. Just in time for lunch. Nothing fancy, just salad and sandwiches to start. Perfect, I replied, leaning on him as we slowly made our way to the living room. The sight that greeted me filled my heart with bittersweet joy. My whole family gathered, occupying every inch of space. Tommy and James's teenage kids played a board game on the floor. Amber was showing something on her laptop to James's oldest granddaughter, both laughing at a shared joke. Alan and Karen chatted on the couch while James helped set the table for lunch. "Grandma," Tommy exclaimed, the first to notice me. He jumped up and ran for a hug, slowing at the last second, clearly instructed to be gentle. One by one, everyone came to greet me. Careful hugs, soft kisses, looks that said more than words. No one mentioned how much I'd changed since our last meeting in Newport, but I saw the brief shock in the younger one's eyes. Lunch was a cheerful occasion, despite the underlying circumstances. Michael had made a simple but delicious meal, and conversation flowed naturally. Stories from school, work updates from the adults, plans for the rest of the week in Bar Harbor. "I thought we could all go to the park tomorrow," Michael suggested, helping himself to more salad. "There are some accessible trails we could do easily." Everyone understood the meaning of accessible, paths that could accommodate someone in my weakened condition. "That would be wonderful," I replied, though I suspected tomorrow might be beyond my strength. After lunch, while the younger ones went to explore the beach and the adults spread out around the house, Michael helped me settle onto the porch overlooking the ocean. He covered my legs with a light blanket, even though it was a reasonably warm day. "I'm dying, not freezing," I said dryly. He froze for a second, then relaxed with a surprised laugh. "Your sense of humor has always been a bit too sharp for my taste." "Liar. You got it from me. From me and Robert, apparently." Michael sat in the chair next to mine, watching the children on the beach below. Tommy had found a crab and was showing it to the others, who gathered in a circle to see. "James told me some stories about Robert," he said. Apparently he was a talented cook too. Made chili so spicy once that they had to call the fire department because the neighbors thought there was a gas leak in the building. I laughed, picturing the scene. That doesn't surprise me one bit. He was always intense, in everything. Like me, Michael reflected, with no resentment in his voice. Just a fact. Like you, I agreed. It's strange, he continued, still watching the children. My whole life, I felt like something was unresolved in me, a piece that didn't fit. Now knowing James, knowing about Robert, it's like I finally have permission to be completely myself. You always had that permission, Michael. You just didn't know it. He turned to me, his eyes, Robert's eyes, shining with restrained emotion. Eliza is coming tomorrow, he said abruptly. I want you to meet her before... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Before it's too late, I finished for him. I'd be happy to meet her. She's nervous, says it's a lot of pressure to meet her mother-in-law for the first and last time at once. Mother-in-law? Are you two? Michael blushed a little, suddenly looking much younger. Not officially, but I've had the ring for 2 weeks. I was waiting for the right moment. The news filled me with deep joy. She must be really special. She is, completely different from Diane. More like... He stopped, as if he'd just realized something. More like Jack, actually. Direct, no games, completely authentic. She sounds perfect for you. It's a shame you won't really have time to get to know her, he said, the sadness finally surfacing in his voice. Maybe not in this life, I replied gently. But who knows? Maybe I'll be around in other ways. Michael had never been particularly spiritual, and I expected him to dismiss my comment. Instead, he took my hand, squeezing it gently. I like that idea. You watching, seeing your grandchildren grow up, seeing the family you helped create continue. The afternoon passed peacefully, with family members taking turns keeping me company on the porch. Sarah shared news from her university department, where she was being considered for chair. James talked about his early retirement plans, so he and Karen could travel more. Alan showed photos of an old book restoration project he was working on. As the sun began to set, Karen, the doctor as always, came to check my medication and make sure I was comfortable. How's the pain today? She asked quietly, sitting where Michael had been earlier. Manageable, I answered honestly, though I suspect that won't last much longer. She nodded, understanding completely. I'm here to help if you need anything. I know you have a local doctor coming, but between visits, thank you, I said sincerely. It's comforting having you here, for me and for the kids. Karen hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. Can I ask a professional question? Of course. How much do they know? Michael, Sarah, the younger ones? About what to expect in the final stages? The question was direct, but necessary. As an oncologist, Karen was intimately familiar with what was coming. The adults know the basics. The kids, just that I'm very sick and I came to say goodbye. She nodded again. If you need help explaining or preparing them, thank you, I said. Maybe we can talk more about it tomorrow. Today I just want to be with them as normally as possible. I completely understand. Dinner that night was a memorable occasion. Everyone gathered around the big oak table, candles lit even though it wasn't fully dark, wine glasses for the adults, and special sodas for the younger ones. Michael had made his famous seafood risotto, the recipe that earned him his first big review in Boston. Conversation flowed easily, stories shared, memories revived, laughter echoing through the house. I watched it all with a feeling of deep gratitude. This tapestry of intertwined lives, this imperfect and extraordinary family that somehow had grown from choices made decades ago. When dinner ended and the younger ones went up to the playroom, Michael stood, holding his wine glass. I'd like to propose a toast, he announced, his voice thick with emotion. To my mother, Eleanor Thompson, extraordinary teacher, mediocre cook. Hey, I protested with a smile. Surprisingly skilled sailor, late-blooming Instagram influencer, and the bravest woman I've ever known. The others stood, raising their glasses. To Eleanor, James added, who connected families who never knew they were separated. To Mom, Sarah continued, tears shining in her eyes, who taught us it's never too late to rediscover who we really are. To Grandma, came Amber's voice from the doorway, where she and the other young ones had returned quietly for the toast. Who showed us even old people can be cool. That drew laughter, easing the intense emotion in the room. To Eleanor, Karen finished, her doctor's look now replaced by pure human compassion, who reminds us all that what matters in the end isn't the years in our life, but the life in our years. To Eleanor, everyone echoed in unison, drinking to me. The tears I'd held back during dinner finally spilled over, streaming freely down my face. I didn't try to hide or wipe them away. They were tears of gratitude, of love, for a life that, despite its imperfections, had led to this moment of deep connection. Later, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was quiet, I sent a message to Jack. Perfect day with the family. Tired but happy. Eliza is coming tomorrow. Are you still coming for dinner? His reply came almost instantly. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Rest well, my Eleanor. Thinking of you, as always. I fell asleep to the distant sound of the ocean coming in through the half-open window, the eternal rhythm of the waves rocking me like an ancient lullaby. The tide came in and out, life went on, and for now, I was still part of it. The days that followed passed in a haze of precious moments woven together with increasingly long stretches of pain and exhaustion. I met Eliza, a vibrant 40-year-old woman with curly red hair and a laugh that filled the room, and I immediately understood why Michael loved her. She treated me without the awkward pity that so many people show toward the terminally ill. Instead, she drew me into conversations about literature. She had been an English teacher before becoming a sommelier, and shared hilarious stories about Michael at the restaurant. Jack joined us for dinners and a few gentle outings, fitting seamlessly into the family dynamic. He and James quickly formed a bond over their shared love of the sea, while Michael clearly enjoyed having another man with culinary experience to discuss techniques and ingredients. On the fourth day, however, the tide finally turned. I woke unable to get out of bed, the pain now a constant, overwhelming presence that even the strongest medications could no longer fully subdue. The local doctor, Dr. Harmon, came and increased my medication, his compassionate gaze saying what his words dared not. The end was drawing near. How long? I asked him directly when we were alone. Days, he answered honestly. Maybe a week, at most. I nodded, having already felt this truth in my bones. Thank you for your honesty. The family took turns by my side, reading to me when I was awake, simply holding my hand when words became too much. Jack remained a constant presence, quiet, attentive, anticipating needs before they were ever spoken. On the afternoon of the sixth day, as rain tapped gently against the windows, I asked to speak with each of them individually. Final conversations, goodbyes that needed to be said, while I still had enough clarity to speak what truly mattered. Sarah was first, my sensible daughter, my peacemaker. I held her hands in mine, now so frail that the bones seemed almost visible beneath the translucent skin. Take care of your brother, I asked, not the way you always have, taking responsibility for his feelings, but by being there, being the sister you've always been. I promise, she replied, silent tears streaming down her face. And Mom, I'm going to miss you so much. I know, sweetheart. But remember what I always tell my students about great literary characters. They never really leave us. They keep living in us, shaping who we are, how we think. And I will live on in you, Sarah, in the books we loved together, in the memories we shared, in the values I hope I passed down. With James, the conversation was shorter, but no less meaningful. I'm sorry I never knew your father better, I said sincerely. And I'm sorry he never got to meet Michael, but I'm deeply grateful to have known you. The feeling is mutual, he replied, his deep voice so much like Robert's that for a moment I felt transported through time. You gave us an invaluable gift, completing our family's story, filling in gaps we didn't even know existed. With the children, I kept the conversations light, sharing happy memories and making them promise to keep studying, to follow their dreams, and to be kind to one another. For the children, I kept the conversations light, sharing happy memories, making them promise to keep studying, to follow their dreams, and to be kind to one another. Tommy made me swear I would watch his first professional baseball game from up there, while Amber asked permission to use my old Leica camera that Sarah had kept safe. It's yours now, I told her, squeezing her hand. Use it to capture the world as only you see it. When it was Michael's turn, night had already fallen. The rain was heavier, tapping against the windows with a nearly hypnotic rhythm. He sat in the chair beside my bed, holding a cup of tea that had grown cold and forgotten. So, he began, trying to keep his voice steady. I guess this is the part where we say goodbye. I don't like goodbyes, I replied, my voice now little more than a whisper. I prefer, see you soon. A faint smile touched his lips. Always the optimist. Realist, I corrected him. I don't know what comes next, Michael. No one does, but I like to think the love we feel for each other doesn't just vanish. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I have something for you, he finally said, pulling a small object from his pocket. I wanted to wait until your birthday, but it was a small velvet box. Inside, a ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. It belonged to my grandmother, Michael explained. Harold's mother. He gave it to me before he died, said I should give it to someone special when the time was right. Michael, I began, but he shook his head. I want Eliza to have it, but first, I wanted you to see it, to know that I'm carrying on the legacy of my father, the man who raised me, who loved me unconditionally. Tears ran silently down my cheeks. He would be so proud of you, I managed to say, so proud of the man you've become. Even knowing the whole truth now, Michael continued, his voice thick with emotion, even after meeting James and learning about Robert, Harold will always be my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up late helping with science projects, who bought me my first set of professional knives when all the other dads wanted their sons to be doctors or lawyers. He loved you more than anything in the world, I said. Never doubt that. Michael took my hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines. It took me a long time to understand, but now I see why you kept the secret for so long. It wasn't just for you or for him. It was for me, too, to protect me. I did what I thought was best at the time, I answered honestly. I didn't always get it right. I made a lot of mistakes, Michael. As a mother, as a wife, as a person, like all of us, he said gently. We sat in silence for a while, only the sound of the rain filling the space between us. Do you remember that time in Cape Cod? He started suddenly. When I was about 7 and got stuck in that tree near the beach, I climbed so high and then was too scared to come down. I smiled at the memory. Your father wanted to call the fire department. I said no, you needed to learn how to solve your own problems. And you stood there below, telling me where to put each foot, where to hold on. You must have been there for hours. 3 hours and 27 minutes, I corrected. I timed it. Michael laughed softly. You never gave up on me. Not once. And I never will, I promised, squeezing his hand with what little strength I had left. Even when I can't be here physically anymore. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, a tear falling onto my cheek. I love you, Mom, he whispered. With all the complications, with all the imperfections, I love you exactly as you are. And I love you, my son, I replied. I always have. I always will. When Michael left, discreetly wiping his eyes, Jack slipped quietly into the room, taking his place in the chair by my bed. We didn't need many words between us. Our months together had created a language of comfortable silences, of glances that spoke more than elaborate speeches. How are you feeling? He asked, gently adjusting my pillow. Like someone who is dying, I answered honestly, but at peace. More at peace than I ever thought possible. He took my hand, his rough, calloused fingers now as familiar as my own. You changed my life, Eleanor Thompson, he said simply. These months with you, they were a gift I never expected. We're two lucky old souls, I replied, trying to smile through the pain, finding each other when we least expected. Like an unexpected current that changes a boat's course, he agreed, his blue eyes brimming with tears. Jack, I called, my voice now so weak he had to lean in to hear me. When the time comes, when I'm really leaving, I want you to be here. You and the children. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I'll be here, he promised at last, until the very end. And after, I continued, I want you to go back to the sea. Take the second chance to places we never went together. Live each day as if it were precious, because it is. I promise, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And when you're out on the ocean, with the wind and the gulls and the endless sky, think of me from time to time. Every day, he corrected. I'll think of you every day, Eleanor, for as long as I have left. The rain outside kept falling, softer now, almost like a lullaby. The pain, which had been my constant companion for weeks, felt strangely distant, still there, but as if seen from afar, through a haze of medicine and acceptance. Could you do me one last favor? I asked. Anything? Open the window. Just a little. I want to hear the ocean. Jack got up and opened the window a few inches. Cool night air drifted in, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of the sea and the distant sound of waves breaking on the shore below. Better? He asked, returning to my side. Perfect, I sighed. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of the ocean and Jack's hand holding mine tightly. I dreamed of whales swimming in deep waters, of lighthouses shining in the dark, of beaches stretching endlessly beneath star-filled skies. The next 2 days passed in an ever-thickening haze of pain medication and periods of unconsciousness. In the moments when I was clear, I would find different family members by my side. Sarah softly reading from Jane Austen, Michael adjusting my pillows with hands trained to handle the most delicate ingredients, Jack simply present, a silent anchor in the growing storm. On the morning of the 3rd day, I awoke with an unexpected clarity. The pain had faded to a distant hum, and a strange energy seemed to flow through me, what doctors call a terminal rally, that last burst of strength before the end. I want to go to the beach, I announced to Karen, who was checking my vitals. She looked at me with surprise and then understanding. I'll see what we can do, she replied. An hour later, wrapped in blankets and supported by pillows, I was carefully brought out to the deck overlooking the beach. The day was unexpectedly clear after days of rain, the sky a deep blue that seemed almost unreal, the ocean sparkling under the autumn sun. My family gathered around me, Sarah and Alan, Michael and Eliza, James and Karen, the youngest children kept at a respectful distance by the adults' decision, and Jack, always Jack, by my side as he had been these past months. Isn't it a view? I commented, my voice barely a whisper. Breathtaking, Sarah agreed, seated to my left. Remember this, I asked, looking at each of them. Not me in this bed, not the tubes or the medicines. Remember us here, together, looking at something bigger and more lasting than any of us. Michael to my right took my hand. I promise, Mom. The sound of the ocean filled the silence that followed, the eternal coming and going of the waves, a rhythm that existed long before any of us and would continue long after we were gone. You know what I learned in these months on the road? I asked, my eyes fixed on the horizon, where the sky and sea blurred into a single blue line. What? Jack asked softly. That life is like the ocean, never fully predictable, never completely controllable. It has its calm periods and its devastating storms, but always, always, there is beauty in it, even in the scariest or most challenging moments. A seagull flew by, its white silhouette standing out against the deep blue. And like the ocean, we are always changing, always renewing ourselves, I continued, every word and effort that was worth it. Every wave that recedes leaves the shore just a little different. Every experience transforms us, even if only in small ways. Sarah squeezed my hand, silent tears running down her face. I spent so much time trying to control the tide, I confessed, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect teacher, trying to keep everyone safe and protected in a version of reality I thought was ideal. You always wanted the best for us, Michael said gently. Yes, but sometimes the best thing is letting people find their own way, make their own mistakes, discover their own truths. The sun began to dip toward the west, casting a golden light over the water. That was the last great lesson I learned, I went on, my voice growing weaker. Letting go. Not in defeat or resignation, but in acceptance and love. Realizing that we can't control the tides of life, only navigate them as best we can. Jack leaned in and kissed my forehead. And you navigated beautifully, Eleanor Thompson. A faint smile touched my lips. I had an excellent captain to show me the way. The hours that followed passed in sweet melancholy, gentle conversations, shared memories, occasional laughter that seemed all the more precious for its rarity. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in impossible shades of orange, pink, and purple, I felt a deep peace settle over me. It's a beautiful way to say goodbye, I commented, my eyes fixed on the heavenly spectacle. No one answered, but I felt Sarah and Michael's hands squeeze mine, while Jack gently stroked my hair. As dusk deepened, a wave of sleepiness began to wrap around me, not the drug-induced unconsciousness of previous days, but something more natural, more peaceful, like falling asleep after a long day spent doing things you love. I think it's time to go in, I murmured, my eyelids heavy. They took me back to my room, every movement carried out with infinite care. Karen adjusted my medication, checked my vitals with the compassionate efficiency of someone who understood exactly what was happening. "Do you want us to call the children in to say goodnight?" Sarah asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak. One by one, they came. Tommy, Amber, James's children, each offering a goodnight kiss, a word of love, a promise to remember. Their young faces, not yet fully marked by life, seemed to glow from within, as if they caught the sunset's light and reflected it back to me. When everyone had left, only Michael, Sarah, and Jack remained, my 2 children, and the man who had brought unexpected light to my final months. "You two," I whispered to Michael and Sarah, "were the greatest adventures of my life. My biggest challenges and my greatest joys, so different from each other and so equally loved." "We love you, Mom," Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. "So much." "I know." I smiled faintly. "I always knew." My eyes met Jack's. "And you," I managed, "you were my unexpected final gift, my second chance." He smiled through tears, leaning in to kiss my lips softly. "Thank you for teaching me how to navigate again," he whispered. Night had fully fallen now, the darkness softened only by the small lamp in the corner of the room. Through the half-open window, I could hear the constant sound of the ocean, that eternal lullaby that had accompanied me through this whole final journey. The tide was turning. I could feel it ebbing, gently carrying me out to deeper waters. "I'm tired now," I murmured, my eyes closing. "So tired." "Rest, Mom," Michael said softly. "We're here. We'll always be here," Sarah added. Jack said nothing, but I felt his hand holding mine, steady, constant, loving. The sound of the waves seemed to grow, filling the room, filling my consciousness. There was no more pain, only a sense of floating, of surrendering to the oldest rhythm in the world. My last conscious thought was gratitude for this imperfect and extraordinary family, for this complex and wonderful life, for this love that somehow I knew would go on long after I was gone, like the ocean, like the tides, eternal in their movement, infinite in their renewal. And then, like a wave returning to the vast sea from where it came, Eleanor Thompson finally let go.